Okay, and rolling. In 3, 2, 1. Today on the Mikey Show podcast is another Veterans Edition. We have with us Todd Hisey. Todd is the founder of a new organization, the Veteran Hunters, and you can find out more about them at theveteranhunters.com. Todd has served over 22 years, all told, as a couple of tours, both Bosnia and Kosovo, which we were talking about a little bit before the show, something that we can connect with.
Yes.
And Todd, why Veteran Hunters? You got bored, had nothing else to do? What's going on? What was the driver for you for creating the Veteran Hunters? It can't be a small effort.
No, so a little bit about my background. So I went 15 years undiagnosed with PTSD for my Kosovo tour. And in the last 6 years, I've been in therapy and treatment here in the Calgary area. One of the things I found over those 6 years was I found a real connection with the outdoors. I live in Cochrane, so I'm just minutes from the Rocky Mountains. And I found a real connection with bow hunting and finding it very therapeutic in connection with the methods and the teaching that we were given at the clinic with respect to staying in the moment, grounding ourselves, etc. And I found with bow hunting, you really use all the skills of the military. Spend a lot of money. Canadian government spent a lot of money training us to be soldiers, and looking for that validation again as a soldier. I really found it in bow hunting, and so combining the validation of bow hunting with the skills that I learned in the Army, combined with all the treatments that I've received from the OSI clinic here in Calgary, staying in the moment and mindfulness and all that kind of stuff. I just found it extremely therapeutic. And I do a lot of my hunting. I do it solo, and it's just a great opportunity for me to get out there by myself, connect with nature, but really just reflect and understand who I am better. And I felt that there were other guys out there that likely felt the same way as me. And the response to the website going live has just been overwhelming. I've spoken to a number of veterans across this country who have PTSD, who feel the same way I do. Most of them have switched from rifle to bow hunting primarily, find the same peace, the same tranquility, but also the same validation that I do with respect to being in nature and hunting, etc. And partly, I joined the military, back after high school because I wanted to serve others. And this is just another opportunity for me to continue to serve others, serve my fellow soldiers. I'm a retired officer. And one of the key things that I took away from my training as an officer was know your men and promote their welfare. And this for me is just an extension of that. Knowing other veterans and promoting their welfare and helping them get better, like I have found, hunting and combined with the treatments have helped me get better.
I find that after you've served, especially after you've done a tour, it's almost like the Rambo First Blood monologue that he does at the end. I used to be in charge of $1 million of equipment. Now I can't even get a job pumping gas. When you are in and when you're doing a tour, you have this huge, overwhelming sense of purpose. And I've never done heroin, but I imagine it's a bit like that. You're chasing the dragon after that. You can never find that giant, huge sense of purpose. It's just at such an epic scale as a deployment. And it drives us to do something big. For me, I wrote a couple of books, and I found a couple of different organizations, and it gives me a sense of purpose, which I absolutely require. And for yourself, it sounds like this is your sense of purpose, your sense of mission, of something bigger than yourself. Does that sound about right for you?
Yeah, I would say that is great putting it succinctly. One of the things I was waiting for was, after being, 6 years in therapy and going through voc rehab. And
6 years.
6 years.
Long road.
Yeah, long road. Veterans Affairs learned a lot from probably from me, and have applied a lot of their learnings to other guys who are behind me. But in that 6 years, I've also tried to help other veterans and stay connected to other veterans and help them get connected with Veterans Affairs. And now we exchange lots of information and we stay abreast of everything that's changing within respect to Veterans Affairs and how they, all the different compensation or programs that veterans can get. But found that basically at the culmination here, last month, I got a phone call and basically veterans had decided that I could no longer work in a traditional job, so they were going to place me on the diminished earnings program, which essentially means that I'm permanently retired now until age 65. So really, it's finding that next thing that's my purpose, because I was kind of waiting for all the different things to come in place, and I thought about the veteran hunters for a while, and looked at it through different avenues, whether marketing the idea to a TV network or etc. But really felt that what I really wanted to do was to set up a nonprofit organization with the mission of finding and funding hunts for other veterans, and that's my personal mission now, is to serve other veterans by finding and funding hunts for them.
Do you do any rifle hunting at all, or is it strictly bow?
I do rifle hunt. So this past year, I probably did 40 days worth of bow hunting. And then I did 3 days worth of rifle hunting. And in those
Holy shit, that's a lot of hunting.
And in 3 days, we got 2 animals with rifle. That's how much easier rifle is. And for a lot of guys in the military, I mean, we're trained to shoot, and we shoot lots and we shoot repetitively. And I had the fortune of working with, Canada's Special Forces early on and working with snipers and those kind of things. So I was quite fortunate to get some additional training. So rifle shooting for me is not hard. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I gravitated towards bow hunting because it's more of a challenge. You have to really close the distance. You really have to work on your tracking skills. I'm not trying to diminish rifle hunters at all. I mean, I still rifle hunt myself.
Well, last year I went out, me and a buddy that I served with, actually was my roommate in Croatia, and we went on an elk hunt for 7 days, and we were putting on infantry type of miles. Like, we're humping and going and getting way back there. So I'm actually really glad we didn't get an elk. But we're doing it with rifle. We didn't see shit. Well, actually we did see scat, but yep. There was no elk. There was no bugling. There was just nothing out there. And we were pushing. And that's hunting. Yep. People have this idea that you just stick your rifle out the door of the truck and out the window of the truck and pull the trigger on some helpless animal, and that's just not what hunting is whatsoever.
And I can totally relate. Some of my most memorable hunts, both here in Canada and I've been fortunate to hunt in Africa, are on animals that I never was successful in harvesting, but it was all with the stock. I remember the one year, about 3 years ago, I broke my collarbone mountain biking with my boys. I have teenage kids, and the joy of having a dad who's ex-military. My kids will have done more before age 20 than most people do their entire life.
Yeah.
And so I'm mountain biking with them and I break my collarbone. And all I asked the orthopedic surgeon was, okay, I have 8 weeks till bow season. Will I be able to pull my bow? And he's like, probably. How often do you need to do it? I said, I only need to do it once. I only need to do it once. So in that bow season, I didn't end up pulling my bowstring, but I was successful in tracking a nice 5x5 mule deer buck. I tracked him for an hour and a half and came face to face with him. Had it not been for a broken collarbone, I likely would have, put an arrow on him. But the fact, it was just a validation, again, of my skills.
And I think this brings us to two of the giant myths, misconceptions of hunting that fuels the fervor of the anti-hunters, which I understand. What's unfortunate is that anti-hunters, like the ones that really hate it because they don't believe that it's ethical, are actually on the same team as the hunters. Because on most hunters that I know, they hunt because it's ethical, because it's a better way to live than farm food. Like our cattle industry, it is necessary. It has to be what it is in order for us to eat. However, the life of a cycle of a cow compared to the life cycle of a moose, as a comparison, if I was being reincarnated as one or the other, I would choose the moose. It's a much more ethical way to eat, to take responsibility for the meat. I'm sorry, I did not mean to go on a monologue and steal the show here.
No, it's quite all right. But I get what you're talking about. I mean, there are times that I've passed on an animal because he's not mature enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? And he needs to get bigger next year. And anytime that we're out hunting, we're always looking for that older, more mature animal. Take that one out of the herd, especially when you're dealing, say, with an elk herd, right?
Yeah.
You want to take the mature bulls out of there so that the younger ones can help, and it just deals with genetics, etc. And so the antes really don't. It's funny, we get the antes, but they don't get us.
What do you have to say about the misconception of the thrill of the kill? Anytime you see hunters depicted on television, other than the Meat Eater show, where it's an actual hunting show,
Right?
You hear "woohoo! Yeah, I got him! Woo-ha! I got that little bastard!" And I've just never seen that in the hunting community. I know it exists, but I think it's in the minority. What's been your experience with that, and what's your take on? Like, do you think people savor the kill, or is it something else? What's the drive for hunting?
I think the drive for one is the excitement piece is when it all comes together. So that's the when you're elated, it's because you've been successful in the culmination of all your skills. You've used everything. You've used everything that the Canadian taxpayers actually, paid for us to learn how to do, and that's the validation. But then there's also the other part too, right? You're taking another life, and you and I have both seen death and destruction overseas, right? And there were periods of time where I couldn't even hunt because I'd seen so much death and destruction that it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Mm-hmm. But over time, came back to hunting and found, like we talked earlier about all the validation and the good parts about it, and getting back to nature. And I've seen it, like all three of my kids hunt, right? And I've seen it. There's also a more remorse aspect because you are taking another life. So one of the things I find is that, I pray over the animal and I thank the animal for sacrificing itself so that I can feed my family. We use the entire animal. In fact, I use the bones for my dog. My dog, he's I have a dog who's an emotional support dog. And so I'm fortunate I'm able to take him with me. And all the bones from the animal, I cut them up, I bake them in the oven, and my dog even gets the bones. So we don't waste any of the animal. And any of the gut pile or whatever that remains, there's coyotes, there's birds, there's everything. It goes back to the earth. So,
I struggle every year with hunting because I'm not willing to be a vegan, and I don't say that flippantly. I've actually thought about it. Geez, could I do that? Could I be a vegan or a vegetarian? I just don't think I could. We humans are omnivores to start with. We're built to have a mix of plants and meat.
Exactly.
But I struggle with taking the life. I am no fan of violence, even though it used to be our job.
Right.
Because I understand the impact of violence. I understand it. So I'm actually way less likely to be violent than other people, even though I'm good at it if I have to be. But watching an animal take its last breath is, I take no pleasure in that. It is actually something I wrestle with every year, and I too, and I'm glad that you do. I too, I have a prayer of thanks and gratitude on my knees, and I have a little ceremony where I grab a clump of grass and I put it in the animal's mouth, and I thank it for feeding my family, and I thank the Creator, and pay homage and respect for that animal, and make sure none of it goes to waste as well. And that's a side of, and we're not rare, I don't believe. Like,
no,
we're not rare. I've been hunting since '95, and I don't think that kind of reverence is a rare thing. And a young hunter that I've taken out recently saw me perform my little ceremony, and because he was like, "Woohoo, yeah, ooh," and I'm like, "No, man, no, young fella. This is what it
You
is."
show your, pay your respects. And, for me, hunting is also a necessity. I mean, I have 2 out of my 3 children who actually have food allergies, and it's largely because we're poisoning ourselves here in North America. And that's a whole other topic that we can go down. Yeah. But I mean, I have two of my children that have a hard time eating many of the foods that you find in a grocery store. And so I literally feed my family with, wild animals partly out of necessity.
There's a guy out of Valley View, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. I got his book upstairs. He's the most famous Canadian psychologist in the world and the number one top-selling author, Canadian author ever. But anyway, actual PhD psychologist kind of deal. He suffered from depression horribly. And as sufferers of PTSD, we understand that.
Right.
At its darkest. And both him and his daughter, he passed it down to her genetically, just horrible depression that they've suffered through. Both of them are on a carnivore diet now. They only eat meat. I don't know if it's strictly red meat, but they only eat meat. And it's the only thing that works.
Wow.
For them. Was that radical change in their diet. There's some experts out there that are saying, you're not glucose intolerant, or you're not wheat or gluten intolerant. It's the glycophosphates from Roundup. It's just they keep piling up in the soil year after year after year after year after year, and the concentrations get higher and higher and higher, more saturated. They transfer to the food. We ingest the food, and we're having a reaction to toxic chemicals, not to gluten.
And I get it, and I'm somewhat sympathetic. I mean, I come from a long line of family of dairy farmers as well as cash crops, and every subdivision that we build now is one less field that we have to grow crops on. Mm-hmm. And I have family that tell me they have to because they're pressured, for volumes and to make a livelihood. But anyhow, it's a whole, you could devote an entire podcast to this one.
Well, I have a suspicion, Todd, that we're going to be on here for subsequent chats. One thing that I wanted you to speak on, because you've actually been on it, you see on social media quite often outrage at African safaris. Look at this bitch. She shot this giraffe. And I admit, African safaris, not my thing. Predator hunting, not my thing. I've never shot a bear or a cougar, and don't have a lot of interest in it because that's just not my thing, unless I want to eat it. And bear meat, I've heard, tends to have parasites in it. No, anyway, I've eaten bear though.
It's all how you prepare it.
Yeah, I don't mind it. But the real pushback on social media, because what the non-hunters believe hunting is you shoot some defenseless animal from the truck, lop its head off, and stick it on your wall. That's what they think it is.
That's as far from the truth as possible.
Yes, it is. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because you've actually been on the African safari.
Yeah, taken my entire family to Africa. Yeah.
So did you just lop off the head and bring the head home, and you just killed some endangered animal, and it just rotted there in the savannah? What happened?
No, and I'll tell you just a little bit of background. So we hunted in the Republic of South Africa. And the people we hunted with actually have become longtime friends now of ours, and I'm going back again this summer. But one of the things is that hunting in Africa in general is probably the best form of direct aid to Africa. In South Africa alone, it's a $425 million US per year business. $325 million of that goes right into hands of Africans employed in there. And they make American or Canadian dollars while they're working there. And if you do the conversion, I mean, the U.S. or Canadian dollar can be as much as 10 or 15 to 1 for every rand. So it's an excellent way to employ Africans to get them out of have-not situation and put them into a have situation.
The counter argument would be is that, yeah, but they're endangered animals and there's not many of them. Is there any truth to that?
No, there isn't any truth to that. So just back on South Africa. So South Africa alone it's 100% of the country is actually fenced and fenced enclosures. One, it's just strictly out of safety measures. You're driving down a highway and you imagine running into a Cape Buffalo. You just can't have that happening. But one of the things we had when we went over there is the hunting is not easy. You're not just going to be driving up to an animal and shooting it and lopping its head off. In fact, it's all spot and stock. I did both bow and rifle. The closest shot with a rifle was 235 meters. My longest was 300 meters on sticks. It was a kudu running uphill, so 642 feet different elevation, running uphill while it passed another animal, and I nailed it right in the vitals as was running.
That's a 1% shot. Very few people could make that shot.
Yeah, and that was my last shot. My last shot of the trip, and totally, validation of skills. What
happens to the meat?
So the meat, you actually consume the meat at the lodges, and it's a commercial industry. So the meat is not the meat that isn't consumed at the lodge is then sold commercially. They actually do call hunts where the meat is sold and actually sold in European markets. And we had the opportunity we spent 17 days in South Africa, 10 of which was hunting and 7 we did sightseeing. I mean, it's a beautiful country, just absolutely beautiful country. Love the people. We saw all aspects of South Africa, good and bad. And one of the things we were able to do was actually go into a grocery store there. And you're not going to find beef in a grocery store there. You're going to find kudu. You're going to find springbok. So the same animals that I'm hunting, are actually going to end up in a supermarket where people go and buy it and consume it.
What about giraffe and elephant? Because that's the ones that drive people crazy.
So it depends on where you are in Africa. There are a number of places in Africa where there's an overabundance of elephants, and they cause absolute devastation to livestock and into smaller villages. And there are other places.
And the crops, isn't it? Is it
crops
destruction?
Yeah, crop destruction, yeah. And part of it is on how the management of the animals. One of the things they say in South Africa is that if the animals didn't have a value, they wouldn't have any. They found that the countries that are in Africa that have opened themselves up to hunting, similar to South Africa, they've actually seen an increase in the number of animals. The animals have a value. The poachers now are employed as trackers, skinners, guides, that kind of stuff. So they now actually have a permanent, consistent livelihood, as opposed to when they're poaching, it's a one-off.
And even the poachers, they're not doing it because they're a bunch of assholes. They're doing it out of desperation, or am I wrong?
No, I mean, you and I have both seen it overseas in the Balkans with the black market. People have to live. People have to, feed their families, keep a roof over their houses. So I understand why they do it. The unfortunate part with poachers in Africa is that they don't actually get to keep the meat. They have to get in there quickly, get the ivory out, and then get out.
Or they're going to get shot because
right.
there's counter poachers.
Right.
The people, and I did consider doing that for a while, but I didn't do it. Thank God. That's something I don't want on my conscience. But there are people employed to shoot poachers. That's what they do.
Right. Lots of ex-military guys, whether they're North American or African, that are employed to protect rhinos and elephants, and it's an unfortunately necessary evil. But, no, back to your original question. No, we just didn't drive up. No, we just didn't lop heads off of animals.
And just to be clear, all the meat gets used.
All the meat gets used. The entire animal
Either
is
it goes to a supermarket, local villages, or you eat it yourself.
That's correct.
Even if it's something giant like a giraffe.
Yeah. Yeah, everything gets used. Even the hides, they find a market for the hides. So
what about with and again, I'm not a predator hunter myself, but what about the lions when a lion gets shot? There can't be a lot of that.
So lions, there's two different types of lion hunting. There's ranched lions, and then there's lions that are raised in the wilderness, and there's always a good debate which is better for the animal. The ranched lion is the most dangerous of the two. It associates man with food. So man is food. A lion, I've been closer than you and I are right now to a lioness, and I'm not food to her. She's only ever been raised in the wild, knows wildebeest and other animals as her food. So I'm not a threat to her. I'm not food to her, whatever. But the animals, the lions that are raised in captivity and then released 6 months prior to being hunted, they are extremely deadly and dangerous animals to hunt. Now, lion hunting is not for me. I'm more of the plains game. I love the spiral horned animals. I think they're absolutely beautiful, and that's my pursuit. And the meat is just second to none. To be honest, I prefer.
Is there anything comparable? Like, would you compare it to elk or moose?
The closest I would say would be elk. I actually found the meat in Africa better tasting than our own wild game here in Canada, and it might be just how my friend Rob prepares.
Well, it's
prepares
all,
the wild game.
you are what you eat too. I mean, depending on what you're eating, and generally when we're hunting, there's not a lot of green grass around, so they're eating whatever's left, for November hunt, and so it's not the most rich, lush greenery that they're eating.
Yeah, and I find it interesting. Some of the best tasting meat come from the springbok, and they're an antelope that runs like always. They're constantly running. To get a good shot on them is not easy because they're always on the move. But they have one of the best tasting meats that there is. It's very tender. But anyhow, so that's my Africa experience.
Maybe that's why the Royal Canadian Dragoons have that as their cap badge, because it's delicious.
Maybe.
Are you currently working or have plans to be joint venturing with any other veterans organizations? One of the challenges is that there are a bazillion different veterans organizations out there, and they're very fragmented. Like, they're all over the place.
So I've spoken to a couple of them, and most of them, I should say, the two that I've spoken to, the idea of hunting and the use of firearms by former soldiers is not something that they're comfortable with, which I find ironic.
Those that are most comfortable and trained, and they're not. So I missed it because I was looking at my question sheet. So who's not comfortable with veterans having firearms?
Soldier On, for one,
Really?
is not comfortable supporting any organization that uses firearms or is involved in hunting. But yet on their application form for Invictus or the Warrior Games, you can actually apply it in both the shooting and the archery categories.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, there's still such a huge fear of firearms among certain groups, but I mean, when we're deployed, I carried 147 rounds at all times because one of my magazines wouldn't carry the last 3. So 5 loaded mags, 147 rounds, tubes full of grenades, and M72 rocket launchers, and a 50 cal machine gun up top. I shot exactly nobody.
Exactly.
Although I had all the firepower in the world to do so. Got shot at a few times, but I never shot anybody. But guns don't make you crazy. And if you have high-capacity magazines, that still doesn't make you a crazy person.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
But again, another conversation.
I know.
Yeah. The non-hunters, I've heard them say, well, if you bow hunt, that's not so bad. That's not as bad. Because hunting with a rifle is bad, because that's easy, is what the conception is. What's the longest, most grueling hunt you've ever done with a rifle that was unsuccessful?
It was sheep hunting.
Sheep
hunting here in Alberta. You're talking about a 20-kilometer hunt, most of it uphill. But you know what? Beautiful scenery. We got into some immature rams, and you know what was interesting? Was able to walk to within 25 meters of them. Rifle slung, just walking up to them and just just looking at them. And that was probably the longest and most grueling hunt I've been on, but most exhilarating. And I can't wait to do it again.
You got to be in shape for that.
You do. And, it's, I guess that's the other good part. I'm 46, but I can still do 20K in a day. And that's, again, validation to the training and skills.
It's the mental hardness.
It is. It's the mental.
Yeah.
It's, I always tell my kids it's 10% physical and 90% mental, and I'll march them into the ground still, and they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Because they just haven't.
I don't think my stepkids would have kept up with me on this elk hunting trip. Me and my buddy, who's like Captain CrossFit, freaking Ed Barden, So I couldn't keep up to him, but there's no way that they would have kept up to us. Back
to one of your questions, you're talking about organizations. It's interesting. It's the non-military related organizations that are actually embracing my concept in my organization. So the Association of Professional Outfitters here in Alberta are very keen on talking to me. I have meetings with them this week, and they're really a key to my success. Is really the mission with finding and funding hunts for veterans, and their managing director is very open to working with me and working with her organization to find ways to help make this successful. And I've talked to other small businesses. I live in Cochrane, Alberta, so there's Cochrane Toyota has been interested in partnering with us. Vortex Canada, Reg Wells, who's a veteran himself, former RCR. Reg is keen on doing something either personally with us or through Vortex Canada. So it's interesting that we have a number of veteran organizations, some of them government funded, that don't want us to be hunting or doing anything with firearms, but yet we have the civilian sector that is looking to help us. So I'm not complaining. It's just an interesting perspective.
Todd Hisey, that's our time, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. For more on the Veteran Hunters, visit theveteranhunters.com. Theveteranhunters.com. Todd Hisey, thank you so much.
Thank you.